Imagine standing in the high desert silence of New Mexico, where the Sangre de Cristo Mountains paint a jagged purple line against the turquoise sky. You are miles from the nearest highway, far from the industrial thrum of any city. But as the sun dips below the horizon and the world turns still, you don't hear the silence. Instead, you hear it. A low, rhythmic, intrusive thrum, like a fleet of diesel trucks idling just over the next ridge, or the heavy vibration of a massive transformer buried deep beneath your feet. You look around, but the desert is empty. You cover your ears, but the sound doesn't dim, it vibrates in your bones. Welcome to Taos. You have just become one of the hearers. The sound that wasn't there. The year was 1992, in the small artistic enclave of Taos, New Mexico, a place known more for its adobe architecture and hippie communes than for industrial noise. Something was wrong. It began as a trickle of complaints to the local newspaper. Residents were complaining of a sound, not a loud sound, but a persistent one, a low-frequency hum that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest cavity. Among those first affected was Katanya Saltzman. She was a typical Taos resident, drawn to the area for its serenity and spiritual vortexes. But the serenity had been hijacked. She described it as a torture. It kept her awake at night, a dull vrum, vrum, vrum that felt like a physical weight. She checked her refrigerator, she checked the water pipes, she even asked her neighbors to turn off their power, but the sound remained, constant and ghostly. As weeks turned into months, Saltzman realized she wasn't alone. At the local post office and in the aisles of the organic markets, whispers turned into frantic conversations. "Do you hear it?" became the new "How are you?" By the spring of 1993, the situation had reached a boiling point. This wasn't just a few people with sensitive hearing, it was a community-wide crisis. The Taos Hum had officially arrived, and it was about to become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. The town that screamed for silence. The people of Taos are not easily rattled. This is a town of rugged individualists, artists, and descendants of ancient Pueblo tribes, but the hum was different. It was an invisible intruder. In April 1993, the frustration turned into political action. A group of residents, led by James Lawrence, a local businessman, pressured their congressional representatives. They didn't just want an investigation, they wanted a federal intervention. They suspected the government. In the 1990s, the Cold War had just ended, but the suspicion of secret military projects was at an all-time high. Was it a new form of submarine communication, a secret ground-penetrating radar, or perhaps something more sinister, mind control? New Mexico, after all, is the land of Los Alamos, the birthplace of the atomic bomb and the site of the infamous Roswell incident. Secret projects were the state's primary export. The pressure worked. Then Representative Bill Richardson and Senators Pete Domenici and Jeff Bingaman requested a formal investigation. For the first time in history, the United States government was officially hunting a sound. The scientists arrived. In the summer of 1993, a dream team of researchers descended upon Taos. They came from the University of New Mexico, Los Alamos National Laboratories, Sandia National Laboratories, and Phillips Air Force Laboratory. These were the brightest minds in acoustics, geophysics, and psychology. Leading the charge was Joe Mullins, an emeritus professor of engineering at UNM. He was a skeptic by nature. He expected to find a simple explanation, perhaps a faulty industrial pump, a specific geological formation, or even a localized case of mass hysteria. But the team set up shop with the most sophisticated equipment available in the 1990s. They deployed highly sensitive microphones capable of picking up infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing. They installed seismic sensors to detect vibrations in the earth. They even performed acoustic surveys of the entire valley. But as they began their work, the mystery only deepened. The statistical ghost. The first thing Mullins and his team did was conduct a survey. They wanted to know exactly who was hearing the hum. The the results were startling. Out of the thousands of residents in the Taos area, approximately 2% were confirmed hearers. This 2% didn't fit a specific profile. They weren't all elderly, which ruled out age-related hearing loss, and they weren't all newcomers. Most interestingly, the hearers could accurately mimic the sound. They described it as a pulse or a throb rather than a steady tone. Then came the physical testing. The researchers brought the hearers into soundproof booths. They played various low-frequency tones to see if the subjects could match the hum. Many could. They pinpointed the frequency between 30 and 80 hertz, a very low bass-heavy range. But here was the kicker. The microphones heard nothing. Despite having sensors that could detect the footsteps of a coyote miles away, the scientific instruments remained flat. There was no acoustic signal in the air. There was no seismic vibration in the ground. To the machines, Taos was perfectly silent. To the hearers, the world was screaming. The psychological theory and why it failed. When the microphones came up empty, the skeptics pounced. "It's tinnitus," they claimed. Tinnitus is a condition where a person hears a ringing or buzzing in their ears that isn't actually present in the environment. But the Taos hearers fought back. Tinnitus is usually a high-pitched ringing, like a tea kettle. The Taos hum was a low-frequency vibration. Furthermore, tinnitus is internal. The Taos hum was localized. When hearers left Taos for a vacation in Santa Fe or Denver, the sound stopped. When they returned, the vrum, vrum, vrum greeted them at the city limits. Then there was the mass hysteria theory. Sociologists suggested that because Taos was a tight-knit community with a penchant for the supernatural, one person's anxiety had infected the others. But this didn't explain the physical symptoms. Many hearers experienced headaches, nosebleeds, and dizziness alongside the sound. Their bodies were reacting to something real. The military shadow. Project Gwen. If it wasn't in the air and it wasn't in their heads, where was it? The 1990s were the heyday of conspiracy theories, and Taos was the epicenter. The most popular theory involved the Gwen Towers. These were a series of high-frequency radio towers built by the military to ensure communication during a nuclear war. Theory had it that the Gwen Towers were emitting low-frequency waves that interacted with the unique geology of the Taos Valley, a volcanic plateau sitting on a massive rift. Proponents argued that these waves were being transduced by the human nervous system. In essence, the hearers' brains were acting like radio receivers, picking up signals that the ear couldn't technically hear, but the brain could perceive. The Air Force denied it, of course. They pointed out that the nearest Gwen Tower was hundreds of miles away, but in the desert of New Mexico, people knew that what the government said and what the government did were often two very different things. The Earth's own voice. As the official investigation wound down in 1994, the Mullins Report was published. Its conclusion was both honest and frustrating, inconclusive. It stated that while the hearers were undoubtedly experiencing a real phenomenon, the source could not be identified with the technology of the time. This left the door open for dozens of other theories. One of the most fascinating is the bronze-sonic or global hum theory. Scientists have long known that the Earth vibrates. Ocean waves crashing against continental shelves, atmospheric pressure changes, and even tectonic movements create a microseismic hum. Usually, this is far below the threshold of human perception. However, some geophysicists suggest that the Taos Valley acts like a giant acoustic resonator. Because of the specific depth of the Rio Grande Rift and the density of the basalt rock beneath the town, the Earth's natural hum might be amplified in that specific spot. For a small percentage of humans with hyperacute low-frequency hearing, the Earth isn't silent, it's a vibrating motor.
The human toll. Living with the ghost. For the residents of Taos, the end of the scientific study didn't mean the end of the sound. For many, it was the beginning of a long, lonely struggle. Imagine trying to sleep when it feels like a truck is idling in your driveway every single night. Relationships strained, Some residents sold their homes at a loss and fled, seeking the true silence of other states. Others turned to hum masking technology, heavy fans or white noise machines that played even louder sounds just to drown out the vibration. There is a tragic side to the Taos Hum. In some parts of the world where similar hums have been reported, like the Bristol Hum in the UK or the Windsor Hum in Canada, the psychological distress has led to severe depression and, in rare cases, even suicide. The inability to escape a sound is a form of sensory violation that the human brain isn't wired to handle. The modern mystery, 30 years later. It has been over 3 decades since the Taos Hum first hit the national headlines. You might think that in the age of satellites, smartphones, and advanced digital sensors, we would have solved it by now. But we haven't. In fact, the hum has spread. While Taos remains the most famous site, similar reports have cropped up in Kokomo, Indiana, Calgary, Canada, and Auckland, New Zealand. In 2026, the Taos Hum remains one of the most persistent urban legends that is actually backed by a congressional record. Some modern researchers suggest that our increasingly electronic world is to blame. Between Wi-Fi signals, 5G towers, and the massive electrical grid, we have created an electromagnetic soup. It is possible that the Taos Hum is a biological reaction to this invisible smog, a canary in the coal mine warning for the human race. The mystery remains. If you visit Taos today, you will still find people who will tell you, with tired eyes, about the sound. They will tell you that it's louder on Tuesday nights, or that it gets worse when it rains. They will tell you that the scientists failed because they were looking for a sound when they should have been looking for a feeling. The Taos Hum reminds us that despite all our maps and our satellites, there are still great unknowns right in our own backyards. It sits at the intersection of science, government secrecy, and the limits of the human body. Is it a secret weapon? Is it the Earth's heartbeat? Or is it something we simply aren't meant to understand yet? Tonight, in the high desert of New Mexico, the sun will set, the wind will die down, the birds will go silent, but for a select few, the desert will begin to thrum. Vroom, vroom, vroom. The ghost in the machine is still there, waiting for someone to finally find the off switch. The sound of the silence, the legend of the Taos Hum. The silence of the high desert is supposed to be absolute. In the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of northern New Mexico, the air is thin, the light is gold, and the nights are usually so still you can hear your own heartbeat. But in the spring of 1992, for a select group of people in the town of Taos, the silence died. It was replaced by something that shouldn't have existed, a low, grinding, rhythmic thrum that sounded like a fleet of diesel trucks idling just over the horizon. But when they looked over the ridge, there were no trucks. There was only the empty, mocking expanse of the desert. This is the true story of the Taos Hum, a phenomenon that defied the laws of physics, baffled the world's greatest scientists, and turned a peaceful art colony into a living laboratory of the unexplained. The Awakening. It began with Katanya Saltzman. She was a typical resident of Taos, drawn to the area's rugged beauty and spiritual reputation. One night, while lying in bed, she heard it, a low-frequency vibration. At first, she thought it was a neighbor's stereo or perhaps a distant construction project, but as the hours ticked by and the world grew darker, the sound didn't fade. It grew more insistent. It wasn't just in her ears, it was in her chest. She went outside. The stars were bright, the wind was still, and the town was asleep. There were no cars moving, yet the air seemed to vibrate with a persistent vroom, vroom, vroom. Saltzman began to ask around. She expected her neighbors to think she was crazy. Instead, she found a community in crisis. In the local coffee shops and the Taos post office, people were whispering, "Are you hearing it too? The trucks? No, not trucks. The engine. The underground engine." By the end of 1992, hundreds of people, roughly 2% of the population, identified as hearers. They described the sound as a low-pitched hum, often pulsating, that was louder indoors than outdoors. It was a sound that ignored earplugs. It was a sound that drove people to the brink of madness. 2. The sonic siege. For the hearers, life in Taos became a nightmare. The hum wasn't just an annoyance, it was a physical assault. People reported chronic insomnia, debilitating migraines, dizziness, and even nosebleeds. "It's like a physical pressure," one resident told the New York Times. "You can't run from it, you can't hide from it. It's inside your house, inside your bed, inside your skull." The mystery took on a darker tone when people noticed something strange. The hum followed them. If a hearer went into a deep basement, the sound got louder. If they tried to mask it with white noise, the hum seemed to climb over the noise to stay audible. Yet if they drove 50 miles out of town, the sound would abruptly vanish, leaving them in a state of shell-shocked relief. The town of Taos, famous for its live let live attitude, was suddenly divided. There were the hearers who were desperate and sleep-deprived, and the non-hearers who looked at their neighbors with a mix of pity and suspicion. Was it a mass hallucination? Was it a localized environmental toxin? Or was the government testing something in the vast empty stretches of the New Mexico desert? 3. Congress enters the fray. By 1993, the outcry was too loud to ignore. James Lawrence, a local resident and activist, helped organize a grassroots movement that caught the attention of Washington, D.C. This wasn't just hippie nonsense. These were business owners, teachers, and retirees. In a move rarely seen in American history, the U.S. Congress authorized an official investigation into a sound. Representative Bill Richardson, who would later become the governor of New Mexico and a UN ambassador, took the lead. He convened a dream team of scientists from some of the most prestigious institutions in the world: Los Alamos National Laboratory, the birthplace of the atomic bomb; Sandia National Laboratories, the Phillips Air Force Laboratory, and the University of New Mexico. In the summer of 1993, the scientists arrived in Taos with trucks full of the most sensitive acoustic equipment on Earth. They brought microbarometers to measure air pressure, seismic sensors to detect ground vibrations, and extremely low-frequency radio receivers. They were determined to find the source. 4. The scientific dead end. Joe Mullins, an engineering professor from the University of New Mexico, led the study. He began by setting up listening stations in the homes of the most afflicted hearers. The results were baffling. The sensors, capable of detecting a whisper from a mile away, detected nothing. The acoustic environment of Taos was by all technical measures perfectly normal. There were no unusual vibrations in the ground. There were no low-frequency sound waves in the air. "We have the most sensitive equipment available to the scientific community," Mullins told the press, looking visibly frustrated. "And according to our instruments, the Taos Hum does not exist." But Mullins didn't stop there. He knew the hearers weren't lying. He conducted a double-blind test. He put hearers in soundproof booths and used frequency generators to try and match what they were hearing. The hearers were remarkably consistent. They almost all pointed to a frequency between 30 Hz and 80 Hz. To put that in perspective, that's the very bottom edge of human hearing, the deep chest-thumping bass you feel at a concert. But if the machines couldn't hear it, and the humans could, what was happening?
The conspiracy theories, Project GWEN, and beyond. In the absence of scientific proof, the vacuum was filled by conspiracy theories. New Mexico has always been the heart of American Black Project lore. First, Project GEWN. The most popular theory involved the Ground Wave Emergency Network. These were massive radio towers designed to maintain military communication during a nuclear strike. People believed the low-frequency radio waves were leaking and interacting with the unique iron-rich volcanic soil of Taos, essentially turning the valley into a giant speaker. Second, submarine communications. Others pointed to the Navy's Project Sanguine, which used massive underground antennas in Wisconsin and Michigan to communicate with submarines deep underwater. Did a secret antenna exist under the New Mexico desert? Tectonic stress.
Geologists proposed that the Rio Grande Rift, a massive crack in the Earth's crust that runs right through Taos, was under immense pressure. Some believed the rocks were groaning under the stress, creating a piezoelectric effect, where crystals in the rock emit electrical signals when squeezed. The biological receiver. A radical theory emerged that the hearers weren't hearing the hum with their ears. Instead, they were sensing it with their nervous systems. Some humans may have a rare sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, and their brains were interpreting those fields as sound. The global hum. As the Taos investigation made international headlines, something strange happened. The hum started appearing elsewhere. Reports flooded in from Bristol, England, Largs, Scotland, and Auckland, New Zealand. In each case, the symptoms were identical. A low, rhythmic thrum heard only by a small percentage of the population, a sound that machines couldn't catch. In Kokomo, Indiana, the hum became so severe that the local government spent $100,000 on an investigation, eventually blaming industrial cooling towers. But even after the towers were modified, many residents claimed the sound remained. The Taos hum was no longer a local mystery, it was a global phenomenon. It became a symbol of the modern world's noise pollution, not just the noise we can hear, but the invisible electronic noise of a high-tech civilization. Human cost. By the late 1990s, the scientific community moved on. The Mullins report concluded that while the hearers were experiencing a real sensation, no single environmental source could be found. But for the people of Taos, there was no moving on. Some hearers became environmental refugees. They packed their bags and moved to places like the Florida Keys or the Alaskan wilderness, desperate for a night of sleep. Others stayed and suffered. There are heartbreaking accounts of residents who spent thousands of dollars soundproofing their homes with lead lining and thick rubber, only to find the hum still vibrated in their pillows at night. Tragedy struck in some hum-affected areas around the world. In the UK, at least one suicide was linked by the coroner to the mental distress caused by the persistent, inescapable noise. It was a reminder that a little noise can be a form of psychological torture. 30 years later, the echo remains. Today, if you walk through the Taos Plaza, you won't see any signs of the hum. The tourists come for the art galleries and the world-class skiing. But if you talk to the locals, the ones who have lived there since the 90s, you will find that the hum never truly left. In 2026, we live in a world more saturated with signals than ever before. With 5G networks, Starlink satellites, and an endless grid of electricity, the electromagnetic smog is thicker than it has ever been. Modern researchers, like Dr. David Deming, who has studied the hum for decades, believe the answer might lie in infrasound. Sounds so low they are felt rather than heard. These waves can travel thousands of miles without losing power. It's possible that the Taos hum is the sound of the ocean waves hitting the North American continent, or the sound of the jet stream moving across the mountains, amplified by the unique geology of the Rio Grande Rift. Epilogue: The mystery of the desert. The Taos hum remains one of the few unsolved files in the American record. It sits at the intersection of science and the supernatural, a ghost in the machine of the modern world. It serves as a humbling reminder that for all our technology, for all our satellites that can read a license plate from space, and our telescopes that can see the beginning of time, we still don't fully understand what is happening right beneath our feet. In the quiet nights of Taos, when the wind stops and the stars come out, most people hear nothing. But for that 2%, the world is still vibrating. The diesel truck is still idling. The earth is still singing a song that we're not quite meant to hear. The desert has many secrets. Some are buried in the sand, others are carried in the air, and some, it seems, are heard only by the heart. The Phantom Engine, a deep dive into the Taos mystery. If you drive north of Santa Fe, the landscape begins to change.
The red dirt of the lowlands gives way to the high volcanic plateau of Taos. It is a land of contradictions, home to the 1,000-year-old Taos Pueblo and also to some of the most advanced nuclear research facilities on the planet. This is where the world's most persistent sound lives. It is a sound that has no source, no signal, and no solution. The anatomy of an obsession. By the mid-1990s, the Taos Hum transformed from a local nuisance into a national obsession. But for the people living in the hum zone, it wasn't a curiosity, it was a prison. Take the case of James, a composite of many residents who spoke to investigators. James was a carpenter, a man used to the sounds of saws and hammers. He knew what mechanical noise sounded like. But the hum was different. It wasn't a sound you heard with your ears so much as a sound you felt in your soft tissues. Imagine a heavy-duty truck idling outside your house. Now imagine that truck is actually parked inside your chest. You go to the basement, it's louder. You go to the attic, it's still there. You put on heavy-duty industrial earmuffs, and the sound actually gets clearer because you've blocked out the wind and the birds. It's a sound that thrives in silence. This paradox that the hum was louder in the quietest places was the first clue that the researchers were dealing with something that defied standard acoustics. The Rio Grande Rift, the Earth's tuning fork. While the public looked towards secret military bases, a group of geophysicists looked beneath their feet. Taos sits on a geological anomaly called the Rio Grande Rift. This is a place where the Earth's crust is literally pulling itself apart. Beneath the sagebrush and the adobe houses, the mantle is closer to the surface than in almost any other part of the United States. This thinness makes the area geologically loud. Some scientists proposed that the hum was actually the sound of magma displacement. Deep underground, molten rock moves through volcanic pipes and fissures. This movement creates a low-frequency vibration known as volcanic tremor. If Taos were a musical instrument, the rift would be its resonance chamber. The basalt rock, hard, dense, and crystalline, could act as a conductor, carrying the deep subsonic groans of the planet up to the surface. For 98% of the population, these vibrations are too low to perceive. But for the 2%, the hearers, their internal biology might be tuned to the frequency of the Earth's own tectonic movement. The Frey effect is the hum in the brain. As the 1990s bled into the 2000s, a new and more chilling theory gained traction: the microwave auditory effect, also known as the Frey effect. Discovered by American neuroscientist Alan H. Frey in 1961, this phenomenon proves that certain people can hear high-frequency electromagnetic energy. The brain interprets pulsed microwave radiation as sound, usually clicks, buzzes, or in some cases, low-frequency hums. Taos, nestled in the mountains, is a catch basin for all sorts of signals. Between the military's over-the-horizon radar, cellular expansion, and the mysterious White Sands testing ranges to the south, the air in New Mexico is thick with invisible energy. Was the Taos hum actually the sound of the 20th century's electronic smog vibrating against the human nervous system?
The case of the Kokomo hum, a warning. To understand the Taos mystery, one must look at its cousins. In the early 2000s, the town of Kokomo, Indiana, faced a similar crisis. Residents complained of a low-frequency hum that caused health problems. Unlike Taos, the Kokomo investigation actually found something. Engineers identified two industrial sources: a cooling tower at a local Chrysler plant and a large air handling unit at a nearby factory. They fixed the machines, and for many, the sound stopped. But here is the haunting part: it didn't stop for everyone. Even after the mechanical sources were silenced, a core group of residents in Kokomo continued to hear the thrum. This suggested a terrifying possibility that once the human brain tunes into a low-frequency hum, it can't unhear it. It becomes a neural loop, a permanent scar on the auditory cortex. The Modern Frontier, 2026, and the AI investigation. Today, the Taos hum has entered a new era.
With the rise of artificial intelligence and hypersensitive digital signal processing, a new generation of hum hunters has emerged. Using distributed sensor networks, thousands of cheap internet-connected microphones and seismometers spread across the valley, researchers are trying to use big data to find patterns that the 1993 study missed. They are looking for correlations between the hum and solar flares, tidal forces, and even the global electrical circuit. Some modern theorists believe the hum might be infrasound generated by the interaction of the jet stream with the peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. When high-speed winds hit the jagged mountain ridges, they create mountain waves, massive invisible ripples in the air that can travel for hundreds of miles. These waves vibrate at 10 to 20 hertz, right at the edge of human perception. The artistic legacy. Beyond the science, the hum has become part of the soul of Taos. It has inspired novels, episodes of The X-Files, and countless works of art. The town, which has always been a refuge for those who see the world differently, has embraced the hum as a badge of mystery. To live in Taos is to accept that the world is not entirely explained. It is to acknowledge that there are forces, be they geological, military, or biological, that operate just outside the range of our understanding. Why we still care. The Taos hum persists in the American consciousness because it represents the ultimate modern anxiety, the loss of silence. In a world where we are constantly tracked, pinged, and surrounded by the hum of servers and the glow of screens, the idea of an inescapable, invisible sound is a primal fear. It's the telltale heart of the 21st century, a sound that reminds us that we are never truly alone, and that the environment we have built might be vibrating in ways we weren't designed to handle. The final mystery. Is the Taos hum a secret government experiment, a geological groan from a dying volcano, a biological glitch in the human ear, or is it something more profound, a reminder that the Earth is a living, breathing, and noisy entity? As the sun sets over the Taos Gorge and the tourists head back to their hotels, the hearers prepare for another night. They will turn on their fans, they will put on their white noise machines, and they will wait. Because in the deep, dark stillness of the New Mexico night, the hum is waiting for them. It is the engine that never stops. It is the pulse of the desert. And until we find a way to silence the earth itself, the Taos hum will remain, a ghost in the air, a vibration in the bone, and a mystery that continues to echo through the canyon of time. This final chapter of the Taos hum story moves beyond the 1990s panic and into the modern era, where technology and human psychology collide. The eternal echo, finding peace in the noise. By the early 2010s, the Taos hum had transitioned from a news headline to a digital age folklore. But for those who still felt the vibration in their floorboards, the mystery wasn't solved. It had simply been abandoned by the mainstream. However, the internet changed everything. For the first time, hearers in Taos realized they were part of a global tribe. The World Hum Map. In 2012, a researcher named Dr. Glenn McPherson, who heard a similar hum in British Columbia, launched the World Hum Map and Database. He wanted to see if there was a pattern. The data that poured in was staggering. From the suburbs of London to the Australian outback, thousands of people were reporting the exact same frequency, a low-frequency, diesel-like thrum between 30 and 80 hertz. What the map revealed was a strange truth. The hum tends to cluster in places with high geological activity or massive industrial infrastructure. But Taos remained the capital of the hum. It was the purest strain of the phenomenon, isolated from the heavy industrial noise of the Midwest or the East Coast. The body as the source. Spontaneous otoacoustic emissions. As the search for an external source, a tower, a pipe, a secret base, continued to fail, a new branch of science turned the searchlight inward. They began looking at the human ear itself. Every human ear actually produces its own sound. These are called otoacoustic emissions. However, in some individuals, the ear's internal amplifier, the hair cells in the cochlea, can get stuck in a feedback loop. This is called a spontaneous otoacoustic emission.
Scientists proposed that the Taos hearers weren't hearing a sound from the desert, they were hearing their own ears ringing at an incredibly low frequency. But why only in Taos? The theory suggests that certain environmental triggers, perhaps the specific magnetic field of the Rio Grande Rift or the low pressure systems of the high mountains, could trigger these internal biological glitches. The spiritual gift. In Taos, a town known for its mystics and seekers, not everyone views the hum as a curse. Among some members of the artistic community and the local indigenous populations, the hum is interpreted as the heartbeat of the mother. There are those who have stopped trying to block the sound out with fans and white noise. Instead, they have learned to meditate on it. They view it as a connection to the Earth's natural frequency, the Schumann resonance. They believe that the 2% who hear it are simply more in tune with the planet's internal rhythm. In this light, the hum isn't a mechanical intruder, it is an ancient voice that the modern world has forgotten how to hear. The legacy of the 1993 hearings. Looking back from 2026, the Taos Hum investigation remains a landmark moment in American history. It was the first time the U.S. government acknowledged that the invisible environment, the waves and vibrations we cannot see, has a profound impact on human health and well-being. The investigation didn't find a smoking gun, but it changed the way we think about noise. It paved the way for modern studies on infrasound and its effects on the human brain, including how low-frequency vibrations can induce feelings of awe, dread, or even ghostly hallucinations. The final echo. Finding peace in the noise. By the early 2010s, the Taos Hum had transitioned from a news headline to a digital age folklore. But for those who still felt the vibration in their floorboards, the mystery wasn't solved. It had simply been abandoned by the mainstream. However, the internet changed everything. For the first time, hearers in Taos realized they were part of a global tribe. The World Hum Map. In 2012, a researcher named Dr. Glenn McPherson, who heard a similar hum in British Columbia, launched the World Hum Map and Database. He wanted to see if there was a pattern. The data that poured in was staggering. From the suburbs of London to the Australian outback, thousands of people were reporting the exact same frequency, a low-frequency, diesel-like thrum between 30 and 80 hertz. What the map revealed was a strange truth. The hum tends to cluster in places with high geological activity or massive industrial infrastructure. But Taos remained the capital of the hum. It was the purest strain of the phenomenon, isolated from the heavy industrial noise of the Midwest or the East Coast. The body as the source. Spontaneous otoacoustic emissions. As the search for an external source, a tower, a pipe, a secret base, continued to fail, a new branch of science turned the searchlight inward. They began looking at the human ear itself. Every human ear actually produces its own sound. These are called otoacoustic emissions. However, in some individuals, the ear's internal amplifier, the hair cells in the cochlea, can get stuck in a feedback loop. This is called a spontaneous otoacoustic emission. Scientists proposed that the Taos hearers weren't hearing a sound from the desert, they were hearing their own ears ringing at an incredibly low frequency. But why only in Taos? The theory suggests that certain environmental triggers, perhaps the specific magnetic field of the Rio Grande Rift or the low pressure systems of the high mountains, could trigger these internal biological glitches. The spiritual gift. In Taos, a town known for its mystics and seekers, not everyone views the hum as a curse. Among some members of the artistic community and the local indigenous populations, the hum is interpreted as the heartbeat of the mother. There are those who have stopped trying to block the sound out with fans and white noise. Instead, they have learned to meditate on it. They view it as a connection to the Earth's natural frequency, the Schumann resonance. They believe that the 2% who hear it are simply more in tune with the planet's internal rhythm. In this light, the hum isn't a mechanical intruder, it is an ancient voice that the modern world has forgotten how to hear. The legacy of the 1993 hearings. Looking back from 2026, the Taos Hum investigation remains a landmark moment in American history.
It was the first time the US government acknowledged that the invisible environment, the waves and vibrations we cannot see, has a profound impact on human health and well-being. The investigation didn't find a smoking gun, but it changed the way we think about noise. It paved the way for modern studies on infrasound and its effects on the human brain, including how low-frequency vibrations can induce feelings of awe, dread, or even ghostly hallucinations. The final silence. As we reach the end of our story, the Taos Hum remains the world's most famous unidentified acoustic object. It is a reminder that even in an age where we can map the human genome and land rovers on Mars, a simple low-frequency thrum can still baffle the greatest minds on Earth. If you ever find yourself in Taos, New Mexico, do an experiment. Wait until the middle of the night. Turn off your phone. Turn off the lights. Step out onto the porch and look up at the Milky Way, draped like a silver veil over the desert. Hold your breath and listen. Most likely, you will hear the wind in the sagebrush. You will hear the distant cry of a coyote. You will hear the silence of the high desert. But for a few of you, the 2%, the sensitive, the hearers, the silence will begin to pulse. The ground will seem to breathe, and you will realize that the world is much louder and much more mysterious than we ever dared to imagine. The Taos Hum isn't just a sound, it is an invitation to remember that we are living on a giant, vibrating, living rock hurtling through a silent void. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, the rock talks back. Thanks for watching.